internet.
Hello,
My name is Ruby.
and
That's
I'm Nathan.
and we're Philosophisciencing. Welcome back. We thought this week we would finish what we didn't get a chance to talk to last week, and also I wanted to, I guess, show the interwebs and all our streamers what it looks like when we do one of our research episodes. And I thought, yeah, it'll be a good use.
About whales.
Yeah. So basically, the premise is I was on my phone scrolling before bed, and I saw this thing about how the tubercles on the whales have magnetosensing bacteria in them, and that's why they can do magnetosensing. And I was just like, "Hold up! I thought I had my hand on the pulse of all the magnetosensory things going on. I didn't know about this paper that they're referencing to, and they're like spouting it at the whale." So I was on Instagram following a whale watching tour
Uh-huh.
site because I do. And I was just like, that's so fascinating. Wait, hold up. Before I, spout this, information to all my friends, I should probably look it up.
Like,
And then
let's
I
look
was,
into it.
yeah. And then I was like, what do you want to do in a stream today? And I was just like, wait, how about I just do that exercise live? And so that was the premise for today. It'll be fun, and I'm really
Yeah.
excited to know if the tubercles actually have the bacteria, the magnetosensitive bacteria in them, which is I know we did a whole episode on magnetosensation in the
Uh-huh.
past, so we know about
Yeah,
the
I was gonna
bacteria.
ask, like, do you consider, like, you're like, oh yeah, I thought I knew all the magnetic sensation stuff, and I was like, wait, oh, is that a thing you study? Like,
No, like it was just there's some things that I like to keep my hand on the pulse for, even if I'm not studying it immediately. And
makes
this is one of
sense.
those
Yeah.
things. And I was just like watching a whale video because I like whales, and suddenly, like, the whale naturalist or whoever was giving the talk was like telling us about this like magnetosensation in the whales, and I was just like, hold up, is for reals? I want to find the paper. Yeah, I didn't like judge the paper, so yeah, but I on purpose did not Google. I did not
Makes
try to find a
sense. So
paper
you can
yet.
Google it in real time. Yeah.
Correct.
Um, yeah, so I was also looking into some stuff. So I think when we did our science current events episode, one of the things that we didn't get to that I thought was pretty interesting was, I'm going to share it on here actually. So this this is the press release for it, which is talking about how twin studies suggest rationality and intelligence share the same genetic roots. And so basically the background of this is that kind of we talk about, so people who study cognition recently have started thinking about, in addition to intelligence, this concept of kind of cognitive rationality, which is basically the hypothesis of it is that you can be very intelligent, but also be very cognitively lazy and make dumb mistakes, even if you are intelligent. And so there's been this idea that these two things are kind of separate, and a lot of our susceptibility to misinformation actually comes from this rationality aspect and not this intelligence aspect. And I think this is really interesting because it matches, I think, what a lot of people tend to say about how, like, you can have people who are very smart but believe very stupid things. It kind of makes a lot of intuitive sense. And there's also been some empirical evidence for this, that basically you can predict more about a person if you know how they do on this cognitive reflection task, which measures rationality, than, like, if you know how well they do that, you can predict more than if you know just their intelligence alone. Or I should say, so kind of you can predict a little bit about how they're going to do if you know their IQ score, but you can actually predict even more if you know their IQ and this other thing. So people have kind of taken that as evidence that, like, this is something that's not totally accounted for by IQ.
I was just gonna say I was having issues with the definition of intelligence to begin with. I was like, what do you mean, like high intelligence? But no, just like high scores on this arbitrary test that
Uh-huh.
some psychologists agree is a reasonable, like, readout of
Yeah.
um like there are people that score really well on these exams
Mhm.
that doesn't match, I would say, like capability, like
Yeah. Mhm.
actually like practicing versus just practicing of the test taking are
Right.
two
Yeah. Yeah,
different
exactly.
things.
Yeah. And I think it's and I think intelligence is kind of interesting. I think like I actually basically did like a whole review paper on this when I was in college. And I think it's interesting because like when you ask like, okay, what is IQ? Um, it is basically IQ is a statistical formula that lets you explain variation in populations. It isn't actually a thing that exists like in a person. It's entirely this kind of statistical construct, and it's a statistical construct that lets us explain why do some people do better at these different things than others. That said, it also seems to have a lot of relationships to your health in general. Like, so for example, if you get
Is
any
it
sort of brain
positive?
injury,
Okay, I
yeah,
was gonna
yeah,
say,
yeah,
is it a positive
huh?
relationship or negative relationship? Because I can
Positive
also
relationship.
see a
Yeah,
argument for highly intelligent people also being severely depressed. Like that as a
yeah, yeah,
combination is also seen as just
yeah. I mean,
anecdotally.
and that does happen, but I think like people talk about that a lot because it seems so unintuitive. But like honestly, but when you look at um like the actual statistics, probably the best thing that you could measure if you want to predict is someone going to be like healthy and wealthy is their IQ. Like that's probably the single most informative thing you could measure. Um,
Interesting.
and so it's interesting because like it's this measurement, like on one hand it's this very abstract statistical thing, and it kind of has this interesting history. It was really created not only to like quantify things, like not only to just kind of to quantify the statistics of a population, but it was also designed to work in a way that kind of quantifies the things that we find socially desirable. So for example, there's a lot of different ways you can measure people, and you can come up with a measure that says like homeless meth addicts have the highest intelligence just by how you define intelligence, but no one's going to actually use that measure because it doesn't correlate with what we kind of societally value. um
I was gonna say
and
it's so dangerous to like apply to like just grade people on their existence. And like, okay, so if you studied for the exam, the IQ exam, you could ace it, right?
yes,
So, but that score you get after studying for it, is it still an accurate representation of your intelligence? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, not really. So kind of, I mean, this is a part that's not really talked about too, which is that like IQ, like so the IQ is really only valid under very specific conditions. One being that you don't do that. And so when you actually go and like when neuropsychologists do IQ measurements, it's done under very specific conditions to avoid situations like that where someone like knows the question. So for example, like you would not be able to get a valid IQ measurement for me because I've done IQ testing and therefore I like know what the right answer to the questions is.
Got
Um,
it.
and actually, we would just say that's not a valid measurement.
Yeah.
Um,
But also, if you're just exposed to logical thinking more often, which I'm
yeah,
assuming
I,
part of the, or even, okay, even just the language. Let's say you're like English is your first language versus you just learned English because you moved to this country like recently. You could score very poorly on it just because you don't understand the nuances of the language, which would not do you mean like that would not reflect on your actual capabilities as like a person, right?
of like intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
like I mean there's all these things and people have different ways of compensating for them. So for example, there's some IQ tests that don't use language at all, so they are designed like specifically for that kind of situation. But I think what's interesting is like, so on one hand, it's this very kind of arbitrary and weird like measurement. On the other hand, it seems like it really does tell us a lot about your health and brain function. So for example, like it is extremely correlated with health. It's extremely correlated with rate of cognitive aging. So basically you can measure IQ in older adults and you can get a pretty good sense of like
how
who's
old they
going to
are.
die first, essentially. You can, it's also extremely correlated with reaction time, which is so people who have high IQs have much faster reaction times. And so it's kind of interesting that in the process of like making this measurement with all its kind of like cultural complexities, we came up with something that is really weird, but also seems to be kind of an inherent like it does seem to be a valid measure of brain health too.
Yeah.
Is the like fascinating part.
No, okay. So my question is, could you switch it around? Like, for example, if it was just IQ exam scores versus reaction time to like a sensory stimulus. So could you predict their intelligence level by the reaction time? Like, is it
Yes.
predicting the other
Yeah.
direction as well?
Yeah.
Oh, why don't we just do reaction time tests on everyone then?
So you could, it's not like it's not a perfect match. So it's kind of like, so you can approximate you can approximate like a pretty good amount of the variance on like kind of, there's a gold standard IQ test. And I think the last time I was reading about this, you can maybe capture maybe like 20 or 30% of the variance between people in IQ by doing reaction time tests. So it's not a perfect proxy, but
Okay.
it's a surprisingly good proxy for like how simple that test is. And like I think what everyone finds interesting about it is just that kind of you have this weird socially constructed measurement, and yet it seems to actually be very significantly correlated with this kind of basic element of perceptual processing.
Okay. Yeah, I was just
Um,
like, why not just measure the actual perceptual
yeah,
processing in
and it's
general?
like
But
you
no,
can.
yeah, I guess the other one is like it's just not as widely implemented, and like you need scientists to take it, whereas the IQ tests are like on the internet, right? Like,
Yeah, although I mean, you really do need scientists to do
to
valid IQ testing too. Like there's
yeah,
all sorts of tests online.
yeah. In
Um,
light of like the current political situation, I think it's quite scary to be like it's a little eugenicsy because like first they go for the mentally disabled, right?
uh-huh.
And putting a number, like measuring it. I'm not advocating not measuring this for science reasons. I'm just saying like getting large swaths of the American population measured on intelligence, scary.
Yeah, yeah.
There's like a
And
little like creepy undertone to it that I'm just like, I it's on the edge of just airy for me.
yeah, especially kind of like when they've really been kind of like amping up the eugenics like in the last week or so. Like
Yeah. So
um
FFG 293. Yeah, that's what Nathan said. It's like about
yeah,
20-30% of variance can be explained using just the reaction tests, reaction time tests.
reaction
Um
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. On the other hand, I was just like, this is kind of great if I want to like track how mentally declining my old elderly parents are. And I was just like,
Like you
parents,
can
you
do a
need
reaction time test. Yeah.
no, no, not just the IQ test. Just like do one every other year and be like, guys, you need to play more video games and you need to use
Uh-huh.
your brain more because you guys are atrophying on the vine.
Yeah. And interesting that yeah, like video games are actually really good for the brain, it turns out.
Yeah, I started getting my mom to play GeoGuessr recently because
Uh-huh.
she was like navigating Japan and she didn't know how to use her like Google Maps application on her phone, and I was like, seriously, like, and so I was like, Mom, we're going on the internet, we're gonna play this game, and it is very heartening for her to see like her being super confused to now being super efficient. Like she can
Being
pull up
like
from
good
her,
at it.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
she has like the agency. She's like, yeah, I can go anywhere in Japan right now. And I was like, okay, hold on, mom. She's like, I don't need to speak the language. I can find. You can give me a Google location. I can get there. And I was like, yeah, okay, okay, you do that.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it worked.
Yeah, it works. And that's like you can like train for things, right? Like we are capable of like I wonder if there's like most improved. Do you know what I mean? Like how much you improve on these tests across time.
Yeah. It's
Would
a
be also
really
a really good indicator, right?
Yeah. So it's a really that is a really interesting question actually because it kind of gets into this whole field of like brain training, which was actually it used to be like a lot more popular, but like there were some labs. I think the most prominent was Susan Jegge's lab, where they claimed that actually um, if you did basically this working memory practice game where essentially you had to remember increasingly long sequences of like letters and numbers and put them in a specific location, so it stressed your working memory. What they claimed was that that you would improve your working memory capacity, and because of that, that would actually improve your intelligence in a general sense. And the question has always been like, to what extent are you making people generally more intelligent versus like better on this test?
I was just saying you could just be really good at memorizing like pi.
Right. And
Like
like we know that happens in some situations. Like there's a world memory championship where people get really good at memorizing pi or get really good at memorizing like all the positions of all the pieces on a chessboard, and their cognitive function at anything else is completely normal. So it seems like that doesn't generalize at all. On the other hand, we know that like for example, the more years of education you have, the less likely you are to get Alzheimer's disease. And so it seems like there's something about education that is producing a very transferable benefit to the brain.
oh, I've always thought that people that enjoyed puzzles and like games, like, do you know what I mean? Like, what if it's actually
Uh-huh.
that? Because I think there's a reason certain people stay in academia longer, and it's
Is
because they
like
actually enjoy. Yeah, they enjoy
because they
learning,
enjoy puzzles and frustration.
learning puzzles, and yeah, and like I want to say like the puzzling part, like the part where you're like running up against walls is fun, but I think they get satisfaction from when they actually do solve the puzzles, and they're actually just like addicts, but for information.
So do you think this is like a selection effect? So like it's that the people who like that are in science, or do you think that being in science or doing the puzzles makes people better at that?
No,
Or
it might be self-selecting. I think the people in the population who already enjoy, solving problems end up being like, yeah, that's fun. I don't mind sitting there like hitting your head against the wall trying to solve this like minute problem for days on end until they find it because they get the gratification from like the couple times you get a hit from like, wow, we made a
Mhm.
discovery. Like that's enough for them, versus
Makes
people
sense.
who
Yeah.
don't get, do you know what I mean? Like, don't get that. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah. Yeah.
this is a really shitty, do you know what I mean? Like, I always think I'm like, like what, like, why aren't more people scientists? I don't understand why, like, not half the world wants to do this as a job. And it's probably because of that, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
the day to day of it is actually being like, that didn't work. Well, that also didn't work. And yeah, that also didn't work. Like, all the things don't work. And then, like, the one time it did work, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. That made it, that made it for the month. And then you go back to
Yeah.
that also didn't work, that didn't work, and that's your life, right?
Which is interesting for like, okay, thinking about this Alzheimer's thing. I think that's the challenge is like, okay, so is it the people who have more years of education are starting off with some factor that makes you want to go get educated and also protect you from Alzheimer's, or is it from this experience? And like, I think what we know is that it doesn't correlate with the known Alzheimer's risk genes. So it seems to be kind of separate from all the genetic things that we know cause Alzheimer's, and that's what makes people think that like actually maybe this is sort of effective cognitive training. Like you practice learning things and it actually has this enduring benefit for your brain,
Yeah,
but it's not entirely clear.
I do
um,
think it's like genetically beneficial to maintain it in our like the human gene pool to have, do you know what I mean? It's useful to have groups of people who want to do this. that are
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
because
Yeah.
and it's probably like conserved, at least in our society, because it's actually useful, because that's where new innovations come from, right? Or
Right.
or just people that will, go hunt and gather in strange places that they didn't think,
Yeah.
or eat things that will allow them to survive longer, right? Like
And
there's
I
some.
think that you need a mix because you need people who are gonna go do stuff. Like it doesn't work if your whole society is just sitting there being like, I wonder where rain comes from.
That's
But
true.
like,
You do also need the
like
farmers and
then
the
everyone's like
grinders.
doing experiments and then everyone starves to death because like no one remembered to actually like grow the food.
Yeah, that's true.
But
That's true.
like I mean that's probably why probably that's why we have a lot of genetic diversity. But yeah, I wanted to come back actually. So like this thing that FFG 293 and you were saying about the reaction time is actually pretty. So it's pretty relevant actually to what this paper that I was reading talks about because they. Oh yeah. Great. Aisha Logoff says great innovations come from a proper consensus. I don't
Well,
know.
I don't actually. Let's talk about that. Wait, finish your thought, and then we'll come back to this
Sure.
one.
Oh yeah, so I was just gonna say that's what this paper was talking about was actually so they're arguing that the cognitive reflection test, this measure of rationality, is basically an IQ test. So this paper is saying like they're actually the same thing. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm joking. Great. Yeah.
Well, no,
Yeah.
we can talk about it. I do think great innovations come from a proper consensus is not untrue for something. It could be true for certain instances. Like I think things that impact large number of people, like everyone agrees
Mhm.
that blank is bad. Let's not do
Uh-huh.
this anymore. And then like, you do that design change, sure. But like in that case, like for example, let's say everybody agrees that drinking formaldehyde, what preserves milk longer, but also basically fixes it, is a bad idea. Let's not put formaldehyde in milk. Um,
Mhm.
like everyone agrees, cool. No more formaldehyde in milk, right? That's that's large. The larger group of humans that that believe that is probably good. It tastes good. um, it makes it shelf
Um,
stable longer and not spoil. But yeah, I don't really
I'm
want
gonna
to
say,
fix
as someone
my
who's worked with
inside.
formaldehyde, I don't think it tastes good. But
It doesn't even smell good. Yeah, but they used to like fix meat and put it on the
with
shelves, right?
formaldehyde,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. They used to fix meat and milk, right? And this is why the FDA is so important, because they were like, wait, hold
like
up, this
why it
actually makes
exists.
animals ill. Like maybe we shouldn't be fixing the milk and cheese and
But
food. Um,
but so what you were saying is though, like for things that affect a large
so
population, you do get innovation from big.
Yeah, so for me, it's like implementing the innovation is important when everyone has a consensus. Sorry, is that the right way to say it? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important to have consensus when you want to implement the science. Like if you want to use the evidence and like act like make it useful for large populations of people, I think it's important for everyone to like agree. Because
That
if
makes
you
sense.
don't
Yeah.
have everyone agreeing, then you have anti-vaxxers. And you have people that are like, I don't want to do that. Like, give me the formaldehyde in my milk, thanks. Like, like you want consensus, and like that's the difference between that and like an innovation where it's like a paradigm shift. So like here is what everyone agrees is dogma now, and then find like someone goes and like digs in a different hole and feels like, wait, actually this thing also works. Like that is not consensus, right? Literally, the process of that person going to make this discovery is they're going against a grain, right? And that is
Mhm.
also the source of many of our great discoveries in science, right? Someone will go and be like, let's try this thing. And then a lot of times it doesn't work, but occasionally it does work. And when that does work, um, now convincing everyone else that this is an important thing and this is different, like this is like the whole, you know, paradigm shift discovery
Yeah.
idea, right? The Coke stuff, right? Like this is an
And
ongoing process.
I think it kind of depends on what you're including in innovation, right? Like, I do think I guess like another thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about this was like I mean, I think you do get some benefits from just having a diverse group of people thinking about things too. And to have a diverse group, like you have to have more than 3 people, just kind of like statistically, like,
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
this is the argument for diversity in general, right? You want people from different backgrounds to think about problems differently because if you put the same people in the same room, they're going to solve it similarly,
yeah.
right? It's
But
like
it's
they got
also it's interesting, like, because in a statistical sense, it's also just an argument for having a lot of people in the room.
that's true.
Like,
Having more people in the
uh-huh.
room is helpful because
Yeah.
someone will just be like, it's kind of like oh, what is that movie where the guy plays like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Mhm.
It's not Who Millionaire. It was like Jeopardy or something, and he's
Yeah.
like the whole movie was this like I think it was like an Indian dude, and he was just like picking up random trivial facts throughout his life, and then like he was just like nailing the how do I
Is
not
that
know
the
the name?
Slumdog
Yeah,
Millionaire
Slumdog
one? Or,
Millionaire.
yeah.
Yeah. So like
Uh-huh.
he just was nailing this test because he just had these life experiences that were like super I don't want to say random, but like all kinds of weird. But you want a room full of different Slumdog Millionaires with
Yeah.
different life experiences to solve all these problems because like who knows, you might need to know some really random thing that this person picked up along the
Like
way,
me. Yeah.
right?
Like what I
Yeah, you
was
never
thinking
know. The
about,
lowest common denominator might actually be useful.
I bet like people have studied, like the thing I was thinking about is like I bet people have studied, like there must be some sort of scaling law where it's like, okay, you're trying to solve a problem. As you add people to your group, like how does the success at solving the problem increase?
No, I think it has to do with how much listening can happen in a room. So like if
Mhm.
there's like really responsive, attentive people that are responding to the talking, you can get a fairly large group. But if it gets too large where people are talking over each other and no one can hear anything and it's not getting processed, then that's too big. If it's so
Yeah.
small that it's just like crickets and you're just sitting there and be like, agreed, then we also
Right.
you don't
Yeah.
have a optimal exchange of ideas and like there's like this kismet like social balance where it's like a good number, not too much, not too little. And I think it depends on the people. Some people can handle
Yeah.
larger groups and
Yeah.
some needs to be like I can handle 4 people. Like
Mhm.
beyond
Yeah.
four, who's talking?
And it
uh
probably depends on the kind of problem you're trying to solve
that's true.
too.
That's also the kind of problems you solve. I think about us solving Bodeborg a lot. Like
Uh-huh.
like there's an optimal number, right? Like minimum you need
Uh-huh.
3 to solve the actual puzzle, but sometimes 4 is really good because you got a quarterback.
Odeborg is this like escape room thing that we go to, by the way, for
Oh yeah.
anyone who's
Uh,
not familiar. Um, yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like I feel like there's all sorts of like scaling things in
yeah,
there.
and I wanted to make a comment on the comment I on I should log off said like the lowest denominator will solve it all. I think the importance of this is that there's no hierarchy of how important your ideas are. Like it's actually I there's stupid ideas and there's good ideas, but they can come from whoever. Like it doesn't
Mhm.
like you don't grade someone on how stupid their ideas are. You grade them on producing or not producing ideas at all. So like if you're just sat there and not giving, then that's like worse than if you give a stupid idea and you're thinking about the problem.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so we
So
like
offer ideas, you're
yes,
saying.
please
Yeah.
offer ideas and thoughts. Like we are not grading you on like your odd comments and like I think that's like a something that a lot of scientists work on, like which is like the wow, today's my brain is it's like the phenomenon where imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're like you have imposter syndrome and you're like I'd rather not say anything because I might say something stupid. It's actually it's worse. Like overcome that and just say the thing. It's fine that this I'll probably say something stupider. Like others will say something
Mhm.
stupider and then it's fine. And I actually try to make that like one of my things. Like I try to say stupid things not on purpose, but like I will just voice my mind because when other people see that, hey, she's also saying stupid things and whatever's coming off the top of her mind.
You provide cover for people to say
Yeah, yeah. It
stupid
like
things.
eases them in. Like I think about this a lot because there's this hierarchy that happens in labs where like there's the boss, like the PI, and then there's like postdocs, and then there's grad students, and then there's like like really trainees, like new people out of college or in college still. And then like I feel like a lot of times discussions are just like postdocs and PIs. Um I remember being the grad student in the room, and I remember like, feeling a little self-conscious about sharing my ideas, but
Mhm.
like you have to you have to get over you have to do it, and to make it safe, the postdocs and PI should also say stupid things. Like I
Yeah.
think it helps the morale.
I usually just say stupid things by accident, but like that's a good way to think of it. Like, yes, I totally was like I was making this conversation feel safer. Totally wasn't just that I completely forgot what I was talking about.
Yeah, that helps too. Yeah, I don't think I think that far. But anyway,
Yeah.
that was
Anyway,
part.
yeah. So I guess the last thing I wanted to mention about this, so there was there's this idea of so how do we measure rationality? Well, there's this idea of something called the cognitive reflection test, and it's super interesting. So it um, it has these questions like, I'll put this in the chat. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total, and the bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
10 cents.
Yeah, so that is the automatic answer that most people give, but the real answer is actually 5 cents.
Is that right?
I can
The
pull
bat
up
and the
the
ball.
logic.
Hold on. Now I'm like, wait, did I do this wrong? The bat is 10 cents more than the ball is?
Yes.
Oh
Yep.
yeah, you're right. You're right. Because otherwise it'll
Uh-huh.
be 90 and 10. Yeah. Okay. Whoops.
Right. So actually that is like exactly how this test works. And so these questions are all like that, and they have basically an answer that's wrong that they call the lure, which is what seems like the immediate intuitive answer to people.
Yeah. Because the number I gave you would have been a 90 cents difference.
Mhm.
Okay.
Um,
Maybe is this test always just, is it verbally given? Is it written?
it's usually written.
I
But
think,
yeah, but I mean, but people do exactly the thing that you just did, which is
right.
that
The
kind of
jump, right? Into.
yeah, they have that jump. And so what this test is designed to measure is it's designed to measure like how likely are you to go with that immediate answer versus how likely are you to kind of go and like
Sit and think
say
on
slow
it.
down, let's think about this.
Ah,
And because of that's how it worked, and also because of these statistics that they did, um, that was kind of why the people who studied this said like, okay, this is really an ability that's completely different from intelligence. They were like, okay, this has to do more with like how people deploy the cognitive ability that they have rather than like how much cognitive ability do you have.
I was gonna say
um
impulse control, like, and
yeah.
also like gut feeling, because
Mhm.
I did that really quick, right? Like I
Yeah.
wasn't I wasn't looking for a trick. Had I
Mhm.
taken it on an exam and I was like, oh, this examiner is trying to trick me, I would probably have thought slower. Or if I was
Right. Yeah.
incentivized, if I was like, hey, you get paid if you do this well, then I would go and check my work. There
Mhm.
was very
Yeah.
low stakes here, right?
Uh-huh.
So I just went impulsively, right? Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Wait, so what part is
um
the reflection part? Is it just like the like how I feel about taking the exam? Is that the reflection part?
So the reflection is actually your ability to kind of so you look at the question, almost everyone will generate kind of an intuitive response to it. Um, and um, and so essentially, like as soon as you see that, your brain will kind of have an intuitive response to it. And the reflection part is kind of, do you just go with that? Or do you think about like, oh, is that really true? Let me check my work. So like kind of the high
Uh,
reflection response would be like you get that immediate answer and then you try to think about like, okay, how did I come up with this? And this has been linked to like all sorts of things like kind of like susceptibility to conspiracy theories, like all sorts of things about how people make decisions. And if anyone's feeling bad about it, it's more than just that one question. So don't like worry if you got it wrong. But,
No, I was gonna say, I would be quite susceptible if like I just went on gut for everything, and that's one of the reasons why. I guess, is this a good segue into my portion of?
Oh, I
of
was going to
reasoning?
show, yeah. So basically, so I was explaining, like, so I was talking about how that worked, and so kind of, so basically, it's been thought this is completely different from intelligence, and but they wanted to kind of empirically test the genetics of this, and so they came up with three different models. And so in this, so miserly cognition is basically the tendency to conserve cognitive resources and like not deploy the resources you have. And G is general cognitive ability, so intelligence. And so they thought of these three different models that could explain how people's performance works on this. And they actually took data from a twin study. And so with twin studies, because you know the genetic relationships between everyone, you can kind of figure out for the genetic drivers of these things, how much do they correlate? Like, is it the same genes that are responsible for one thing versus the other? And so kind of one hypothesis is this one that we were just talking about. These are completely different things. So like your general intelligence is related to kind of like your vocabulary, your numeric sequence performance, that sort of thing. And this cognitive reflection is kind of this completely different thing. The other model is that there's some overlap, but there's also these two genetic drivers. And the third model is there's really just general intelligence, and cognitive reflection is just like kind of another thing that you could put on an IQ test, the same way that you could put spatial reasoning or vocabulary or something like that.
Do they give a like general score for the population? Is it mostly the B, or just like a little bit of both?
Sorry, what did you mean by a general score?
Like the strategy for like general populace, like what are the proportions in each combo? Like mostly the miserly version, miserly in general, or just general?
Like in terms of what strategy people use to solve it?
Yeah. Like what's like the general split in the regular?
So I guess most people fail this cognitive reflection test. So most people kind of don't engage resources, and they kind of give the answer. They say like, okay, the bat costs 10, or the ball costs 10 cents. I think a small portion of it succeeded. But this isn't showing the breakdown of strategies. This is basically saying like, so in this model, it's saying that general intelligence influences performance on these cognitive tests, and this miserliness influences performance on the cognitive reflection test, and just these don't have anything to do with each other. That's model A, versus model B is kind of both of these influence performance on cognitive rationality and also on these other things. So the prediction here is that like if you have higher intelligence, you should actually do better on this cognitive rationality test than if you had lower intelligence. Because it depends on both G and this miserliness. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then this final thing is just you can account for everything with general intelligence. And so to summarize a lot of the complicated statistics they did, they found that this is the best fitting model, essentially, which is that you have environmental and genetic factors, both of which influence your your general intelligence. And this general intelligence seems to be basically kind of the sole determining factor for all four of these domains, including the cognitive rationality, so essentially the argument that they make in this paper is that we've thought of these as kind of different things, like intelligence and rationality. And in some ways, like in some information with processing ways, they kind of are conceptually different. But in a genetic sense, the things that predict your rationality are basically the same things that predict your intelligence. And you can really just think of this cognitive reflection test as like a short IQ test, kind of the same way that you could think about like the reaction time test is a short IQ test.
Got it. And this is the reactionary kind, just like a bunch of puzzles that are reactionary puzzles, basically. Could also determine how you would score. That's nice.
Right. So it's saying basically like cognitive reflection is a measurement of IQ, vocabulary is a measurement of IQ. So this is International Cognitive Ability Resource, ICAR. So these are different open source, just kind of cognitive measurements. It's essentially saying genetically these all seem to be linked to general cognitive ability. I was gonna say, I think this is actually, like, I found it kind of hopeful. I mean, I think I study like cognitive enhancement, and I think one of the interesting things is that like what this suggests is that like maybe if we can like make people's working memory better or make people like better at paying attention, what this predicts is that should make them like fall for conspiracy theories less. Or even if we like take the lead out of gasoline, like we should actually be able to make people better at this thing that's super relevant to like processing information. And like,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, now I get why you were bringing up Nadira's paper, because the paper she posted was very it was also hopeful in that way, in that if you generally, I'm not going to go through the paper because the evidence is only all right. It was basically the idea that if you had a group of people who came in with a bias in one direction or the other, and then you gave them actual factual information, like, and then like you taught them a bunch of stuff, and then you came back and you gave them the quiz again, if how much of it they would have internalized. And basically most people became less extremes of whatever they came in as before, which meant that it was convincing, giving people actual factual information, and they're learning it. And then if you incentivize them to be like, hey, if you learn this well, like, it will pay you. And then they learned it, and they come back in a month where they didn't pay you, and then like you would score equally, you would score towards the median, which is like the less extreme of both sides, which is nice because that means if people are willing to engage and use their noggins, we could have less extremists on a lot of topics, which puts most people in the middle, which I feel like is a good place to be when it comes to things like highly divisive things, which because like the other argument is that if you're in an environment where it's like an echo chamber, you can just exacerbate the extremist ideas more, like you can become more and more. But actually it's like, here's an argument where if you give truth in things, it actually could help. So that was the paper, and they were trying to show evidence for it. Very cool.
Okay, now we were going to talk about whales.
Yes, now we want to talk about whales. And this was like an exercise we've been meaning to do, because we wanted to switch up some of the stream episodes so we do some different things. So this is a new one where basically I'm just going to share my stream, and then Nathan, will you call out things that people are saying in the chat, because I can't see the chat while I'm looking. And you can also call out things and be like, hey, look that up instead. Okay, so the premise was I was scrolling on my Instagram, and I heard a person tell me that the tubercles in the whales are the magnetosensing organs because they express magnetosensing bacteria. Okay, and I was
also I was going to say, thank you. Yes, they were saying, I think the ability to understand if people are genuine or not, combined with fundamental system thinking, would save the world, and they're pretty sure we're genuine. So thank you.
Aww, thank you. We try. A few people at a time. Okay, so I'm gonna just share, I guess, this window that we're in. Okay, share. Okay, so it's a little drosty for now, right? Okay. So I would just look up whales. Can you guys see the screen?
I don't. Hang on, I have to add it, I think. Yeah.
Whales.
There we go.
And
tubercules.
Tubercles. Okay, tubercles. I don't know if I spelled that right. And magnetic reception. Okay. tubercles, what senses are there, anatomy, sound. Okay, maybe at first I need to spell those things correct. Let's see. Investigations of the roles of magnetic acoustic cues in whales. So specifically, it's magnetoreception bacteria, right? It's actually quite fascinating that, like, because okay, if this is true, then that would mean that these bacteria are in a symbiotic relationship with the whale.
Like in that they're providing the magnetic sensing to it.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, okay. So this is an old paper from 1985. If you notice, the way I read papers is I open a shit ton of tabs. Okay, so
Don't crash your computer.
I know, during the middle of the stream, magnetoreception and biomineralization of magnetite in cetaceans. So that seems, whales, baleen whales, migration, blah blah. Okay, let's look at the figures. Show me figures.
I actually have an idea, which at the same time, I'm going to try using this Gemini deep research thing to ask about whale tubercules.
Okay, are we racing? Am I racing in
AI? Let's race.
Okay, so it's Ruby versus AI on finding...
Okay, wait, hang on. You have a head start, but let me quickly type it in. Okay, so the question is about, do whales use magnetic tubercules to navigate?
No. How are they using magnetic sensing? Like, how is it happening? Is it because of a symbiotic relationship between the bacteria and the whale? Oh, and for those who don't know, the tubercle are these sensing organs that are on the skin of the whale. They're like the bumps that you kind of see on the outside of the whale. Okay. Magnet, dorsal, dura. Okay, no, these are like literally looking in the brain.
Okay, AI is going.
Okay, let's go for a different paper. Whales and tubercles and actually, you know what? Let's start with the Instagram post. Whales and tubercles and magnetosensation. Let's see if I can like find the article that they were using. Are bacteria responsible for the magnetic sixth sense? Great. So first find an article, then find the paper they're referencing in a recent press release. Who's press releasing? Science Daily. Okay, where's this paper? No, like this information about the magnetic sixth sense. So University of Central Florida. Okay, show me the paper. Where's the paper? Okay, the paper is a Royal Society paper. Philosophical Transaction of Royal Society. Where's the actual paper?
Oh, could you reshare your screen also, Ruby?
Oh no, is it not is not currently shared?
No, because I went to go show the AI.
Okay. Let's go back to stop sharing. Reshare screen. I guess my window. Not that window. This window. Yeah. Share. Select. Oh, okay. I'll just share my entire screen. Does it let me? Entire screen. Share. Okay. Sorry. We're back here. I think I found the paper, which is a 2020 paper, which kind of makes sense that it was recent. Okay, so this paper is called Symbiotic Magnetic Sensing, Raising Evidence and Beyond, which is a review. That's not it. That's okay. Okay. Despite lengthy rigorous research, yield numerous studies reporting the ability of animals to sense geomagnetic field. The identity of the magnetic sensor remains enigmatic. Yes, I know. That's why. Okay. Yeah. It is akin to...
So it remains enigmatic, so they're not sure.
Yeah. So that's like the first line of this paper, and they're sensing this paper. Okay. So recent supporting evidence. Okay. Eukaryotic marine protists. Actually, we covered this paper when this came out.
We did.
Yeah. So this is the bacteria. So it was actually a really cool experiment. So basically, they found that there's these magnetosensing bacteria that are in the North Pole and the South Pole, and they use magnetosensation to figure out which way is up. And so if you took these bacteria from the South Pole and put them in the North Pole, they'll swim the opposite direction because they sense that direction is up. And so they use it for orienting in 3D space, right? So they're just flipped. So that was like kind of a cool paper, but Okay, but we want to find magnetosensing bacteria are too rare to regularly involved. I was like, where is the
Oh,
empirical
uh-huh.
experience where they like cut off the tubercle and then just like sequenced all the bacteria
Is
in the
it not
tubercle?
cited there? Like,
Well, they cited this review. Like this is
mhm.
the review. General closer relation. Is there a figure? Okay, here. Number of registered MTB species per year since the first registration. Okay, that's exciting. So we're basically finding a lot more species that have magnetosensing every year, like ish. Um, Prevalence of bacteria among surveys. Is there another figure? Host associated. Ah, okay. So that's kind of cool. So, there seems to be a bunch of host associated and soil associated bacteria that have
That are also
magnetosensing.
found on. So these are not ones that are found on the whale, or they are?
No, they're just like on a host of some kind, but like there's also human gut, human or like mouth, human oral, that's mouth, human vagina. Okay. Huh. Wait. There's samples that contain magnetotactic bacteria that were found in all these different environments.
So it
Cool.
sounds like the magnetic sensing is just like a very common thing for bacteria to have.
Yeah, this makes it seem way less like special.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is like, how is the tubercle interacting with it, right? So the the argument in the birds when they were talking about the magneto-sensing that birds can do, they said it's like in their cornea or like in their eyes or their optic nerve or
Uh-huh.
something, so that they could like visually use that information. Um, but whales, like they didn't say like, is it mechanotransducting on these tubercles? Oh, look, this is penguins. Oh, it's only in specific species of penguins. I don't know if you can see this figure. Control plus. Show me the figure. Okay, so in this figure, they're showing us different species of penguins and then the abundance. So it's really high in this
Penguin.
Magnetobacterium bavaricum candidus. So in this particular species is very high in certain penguins and in turtles too. So it's actually specifically
Mhm.
this species that's actually kind of high. Control minus. Okay, driving host sensing mechanisms, gut brain axis. I wonder if I should. Oh, ooh, look at this. Examples. Physical aggregation. Oh, okay. So these are
Uh,
hypotheses for
mhm.
how it could happen. Why are these so small? Okay, so basically, that's much better. So they're saying that either the actual host aligns along the magnetic field directly. So like the entire organism just lines up. Um, the organism could also hang out in like a cilia, I guess, along the
Mhm.
magnetic field, and then
And
like
so by organism, you mean the bacteria.
yeah. So the bacteria
Yeah.
could hang out by like the follicles and then interact with the neurons. And so when the cilia, like the flipper moves, it would sense
Mhm.
it because like the magnet is like pulling it in a certain direction, and then the
Makes
animal would
sense.
sense it. So you're
Yeah.
like, oh, you're pointing the wrong direction, and then you'll feel more versus pointing the other direction. And so you can imagine that would give it like a direction. Cell communication. So the host receptors facilitate a neuroresponse following a symbiotic secretions. Oh, so it could also just secrete stuff in one direction and not the other,
Mhm.
and then it would sense it because it's dumping stuff out. And then the last one is it could visually perceive the movements. Yeah, this is the bird version where like you have it lined up across their eyeballs. And I think these are all just hypotheses though.
Mhm.
These are
So
not
they haven't
actual. Yeah, they haven't actually found it.
tested it. Which, like, okay, in fairness, doing experiments on whales is probably like kind of hard.
That's true. I suppose you could find them when they've been beached or something.
Uh-huh. But like if you need to do like physiology,
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so
Do you want to read this thing from Gemini Introduction, The Enigma of Whale Magnetoreception?
yeah, let's hear
Okay.
this.
Hang on, let me pull it up.
Okay, so I'm seeing, so this is used for navigation. Does humans have this? To I I think my lab mate has this, but I definitely don't have it. So I
You
think it
should
might just
ask
be,
your lab mate how he perceives it.
yeah, no, he just so like one thing is like he could just really be cognizant when he comes into rooms and buildings, and like every time he makes a turn he's just like that way is still north, so he knows which direction is like the sunset all the time. And so some people are just keep tracking of that all the time, and
I guess.
it's
Okay,
just how
I
they
will say
navigate the world.
I don't totally believe that that is magnetic sensing though, because like magnetic sensing in a building, like there is so much interference with like the thing that's actually magnetic north. Like it's like if he like occasionally got confused and like thought north was like the direction that the power transformers were, then like I would believe it was magnetic sensing, but
That
like
That's what we said we were going to do. We were going to take him into the
yeah.
basement where the fMRIs were. So these are these giant magnets they use for imaging, and just like blindfold him, put him on a spinny chair, spin him around a bunch of times, and then tell him to point. Like we'll move him around slowly, and then he'll tell us like when to stop, and then see how accurate he was. Like that was like one of the things that we definitely
One
will
of the
do to them.
experiments you want to
Yeah,
do?
yeah, just
Yeah.
to see how accurate he is at
And
magnetosensing. But
also, I mean, I guess the really interesting question is like, okay, is his accuracy influenced by the MRI magnetic field? Because if he's super accurate, but it's not influenced by the MRI, then he's probably not using magnetic fields.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
it could just be something else. um yeah, I mean is a very, like, I would believe it if you found it, but we currently don't have the evidence to say it. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those
Yeah.
things. So
Anyway, do you want to take a look at the
yeah,
enigma
yeah,
of
yeah. Show us.
whale magnetoreception?
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
want to see your
Let
what
me
what you
pull it
come
up.
up with, because I still can't find this paper that allegedly happened. Like this was a recent post on Instagram. This is what's frustrating. Like people are spouting information, and I was like, "Show me your sources. I want to
And like they
know."
don't cite it.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't cite it, and I'm just going approximately why by the time this thing was posted. So it was posted, last year.
Mhm.
I guess that's how far behind I am on reading.
Yeah, but yeah,
Um,
like not even from like a credibility, like oh, I want to know if this is true standpoint. Like I'll see something on Instagram, I'll be like, oh, I want to like learn more about that, and they're just like,
yeah,
no, never mind. But
yeah.
okay, so Gemini started talking about what magnetoreception is, which we know.
You need to feel the evidence before it arrives. That's pretty
Wait,
accurate,
what?
actually. Should I log off says you need to feel the evidence before it arrives. Well, because so in essence, what happens is what people are spouting as facts is actually just a really good hypothesis, right? Like until someone went and out and tested it empirically, I would say it was just a theory and a hypothesis, which could be true or could not be true. There's just not great evidence for it unless you can find it. Um, oh, it would have been really cool. I got myself excited about the whale tubercle bacteria. I
Yeah,
was just like, what is this?
this is pretty interesting. So Gemini is cycling, despite 5 decades of research explain like establishing the behavioral reality of magnetoreception, the fundamental receptor cells, the specific molecules evolved, and the physiological mechanisms remain elusive in virtually all animals studied, including whales. This has led to magnetoreception being described as a sense without a receptor. So let's see, where does this come from?
Ooh.
Symbiotic magnetic sensing, raising evidence, and beyond.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do think like this is what AI is supposed to be used for. It is to help us sift through all the papers faster.
Right.
And find the papers, and then once we find it, then we can like judge it with our eyeballs, because a human wrote this, right? Like
Yeah.
some other
Uh-huh.
scientist sat down and wrote this after they did a whole experiment.
Wait, so this is the paper that you were reading, right?
Is it this? Wait, can you go back?
Because it has prevalence of magnetotactic bacteria among metagenomic surveys. Like,
Yes,
yeah, it has
yeah,
that same
exact same
figure.
paper.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
Okay.
referring. So all of these articles are referring back to the same paper, which is a
Oh
review,
yeah,
by the
here's
way.
the hypothetical mechanisms.
Yeah, and so yeah, so it's the
So
same paper. So the reviews are actually, I mean, the reviews are very nice. Reviews are kind of like
mhm,
the equivalent of, I want to say, like a textbook chapter on this
mhm,
specific topic, because it is just like it's like taking all the things that we kind of know from like all these depths of papers from everywhere and putting it in one place. And so it's like a fast way to like get caught up really quickly about it. Um I just put a ton of conjecture into that boy and it will give me the right pointers if they exist. Very useful. If they don't, I will get mad.
I will say like, and I like, I'll warn you. So like, I was doing this experiment because I was doing something recently where I was trying to find papers on like what are the potential risks of stimulating slow waves in the brain, and like it does sometimes just make stuff up. Like it made up this study. It was like, oh, when you do this, like these rats had like increased delta power even after like discontinuing the stimulation. And then I cited, and then I was like, oh, that's interesting. I should read that. And the paper it cited like there were no rats involved in the paper. It was a review paper, so it didn't really have any data, and it didn't say anything about that.
I think that is really annoying and super, like, that's one of my pet peeves. So when I was writing my PhD thesis, I remember so like I had absorbed all this information from like years. So like I would remember this figure from a paper and I couldn't find the paper for the life of me. And I was just like, internet, find this paper for me. And right around when I was writing my thesis defense, like ChatGPT had just dropped, and I was just like, okay, let's try it out. Like we're looking for this figure that looks like this, and it says this thing, and it would not do it. I could not like bend. I wonder if it's better now, but like at the time, I was like, if you know exactly what you want to write or say or find, it's actually not amazing at it. Like it is off by that much. It'll find you an article that's adjacent, but not what you're looking for. And I was just like, how? Like that, like, there was like a gap. It's probably improved since. I haven't really tried that hard. Like I haven't tried to use AI to like.
Right. Since like you tried that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was so terrible. Because like I was just like, wow, my writing is better. Like if I put the mental effort in it, it's better. Like it's saying exactly what I want to say, not just something pretty. Um, so sure, maybe it's gotten a lot better. Um, but like at the end of the day, like I still have to make the bullet points, right? The ideas still have to come from me. They can prettify it. Like I don't want the ideas coming from AI. I feel like it's just gonna get. I was gonna say like laundered. Like
What do you mean?
so like if me and another scientist both had similar questions and they both asked AI, we're gonna get the same result.
I see.
So
Yeah.
eventually it's kind of like having, how we say it's really important to have diversity people in the room. It's actually just having a copycat in the room that just says
Yeah.
the same thing over and over again, which is
Although it is an interesting like I mean there is an interesting assumption there, which is that the AI is doing that more than people are, which is I think I'm not sure if it's true or not.
I know.
Like
Okay, actually, that's true. We also say like I was like, well,
Mhm,
actually, if I was in a room, I would say similar things every
mhm,
time, but it would be like my similar thing every time, but it wouldn't be the
uh-huh.
same. It,
But it's also like I mean human brains, I mean we are in many ways doing the similar thing where it's like we try to predict the next word that's going to be in this sentence. Like that's how we work physiologically at some level. So I think there's this cultural influence too. It's like if I say like if I say like, oh, I'm going to look at the neural correlates of iron in like you have some ideas of like what iron is going to be involved in.
yeah, yeah. No, that's true. Though sometimes I really admire the papers from, I don't know. I've been reading a lot of papers from the 80s recently because I was like, let's find like foundational work, and it's like these electrical recordings they did in the 80s and like a cat, and I was just like, wow, they recorded 3 neurons. And then they published a paper, and, so on some sense, I'm like, they had really limited technology, and they made all these conclusions from it. It's amazing how solid some of that science is. Like, I'm not going to do it, but I'm pretty confident that if I were to go grab a cat right now and record from this part of the brain, there's like it's fairly reproducible, right? Like you could probably find these neurons again.
Uh-huh.
Um, like you just trust it. And we built a lot of neuroscience on top of those kinds of experiments, which is really nice. What's scary now is that the rate of publishing now, like of these super complex papers with like 20 different techniques, I wonder how reproducible it is now, which is kind of like the a topic for next week, I think.
Yeah, we were going to talk about reproducibility.
Yeah, and like what it means in science and society too. I think part of it is because we've become less reproducible, either in
Mhm.
like people haven't been able to reproduce labs to labs across labs, or across um like like when it works in a small group and it doesn't work massive groups, right? Like we see that happen a lot in drug studies where it'll work in a mouse and then they're like, okay, we're going to try this on like, primates now on like and then it still works, and then they started on humans, and then like small group of humans it worked, and then they went to big groups of humans, and then the big groups of humans it didn't work, and then they pulled a clinical trial and you're like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like why didn't it scale? And sometimes it's like compliance, sometimes it's just like there's like little things to make things not work right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really excited to talk about that because I think it's a really interesting topic. I've been I've been like I've been like talking with some funders and they're like, why did you stop collecting data? And I'm like, because we collected like the amount of data that we pre-registered. And they're like, why can't you collect more? And it's not like an intuitive answer, but like, I mean, there are very good reasons like why you say like we're gonna have exactly this many subjects at the start of the study.
Correct. Yeah, well, you did a
But
power
it's not
analysis.
intuitive, and
Yeah,
and there are trade-offs and everything too, which is I think is the
yeah.
interesting point.
Well, the problem is that the publishing system, which I gripe about all the time, doesn't really reward reproducing something that people already know. Like, it's kind of like if you're not first to discover something, then you're old news. But also, like in the effort to keep coming up with new news, like no one's repeating the old stuff, and then we're building House of Cards, and it's really easy to do that, and we can run into that. You can see how it's a problem that you can't get jobs unless you have publications. You can't get publications unless you're publishing something kind of crazy and wackadoodle and a discovery. And then there's only so many discoveries you can make because like that's the rate science discovery happens at. And so if you're forced to like make shit up, then and no one tries to reproduce it, then sometimes people are building off of, weak or like small statistical differences, and then people will be chasing things for years. And yeah, anyway. Yeah. Oh, I think we have some AI anxiety in the chat. Or pro AI thoughts.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, and now we'll get 1 billion autism vaccine papers. I know. Actually, you know what would be really fun? Should we go to the original vaccine papers and do a journal club?
I don't know. I read that paper, and honestly, that whole saga is just like so depressing. And then, like, it's not fun.
No, but I think we should read it like critically. Like we should just do like my paper roasting club style.
Okay, I will say like the thing about that paper is like the problem with it was that he made up the data. So like the paper seems fine like when you read it, but it's just like it's a work of fiction. Like
yeah. Well, we should read the
which is interesting. It's a problem for
rebuttals, right?
peer review is that also like that's the thing people talk about is it's very robust against people like making incorrect like leaps of logic and stuff, but it's not very robust against people just like making stuff up.
Yeah. and it's so hard, right? It's like once you lead people down this way, you're like, here, this paradigm shifting thing, right? Which was that was like, hey, like vaccines might give you autism. Paradigm shifting. No one knew that before. No one thought about it that way. And then suddenly everyone in the field was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. And then other labs try to reproduce it, right? And then they were like, wait, that didn't work out for us. That also didn't work out for us. But like you already got the big splashy news reel. It's not big and splashy to be like, oh, hold up, actually we weren't correct. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to backtrack once you let it out of the bag. And I think a lot of scientists, or scientists that I really respect, are people who are really careful about saying things, because they don't want it to be wrong in like 5 years because that's their reputation on the line, right? I mean, clearly these people didn't care.
Yeah.
Like, but I
I
like
mean,
most self-respecting scientists do care about their
yeah.
reputations.
I mean, and I think like, I mean, there's a balance too because it's like we have this example of like the autism stuff, and we have people like there we criticize people for not being careful enough, but kind of then like I mean, you have kind of the counterexample is say like the COVID pandemic, where it's like there were people out there being like, this seems like it's going to be really, really bad at the start of the pandemic. And they got actually a lot of criticism for kind of fear mongering. And it turns out that like they were right.
It
And
was
actually,
that
if you
bad.
listen to those people, like you were significantly less likely to die. Like, and so it's like if you think, like if you genuinely think that there is uh like a public health problem happening, it kind of brings in this whole other ethical aspect of it too.
Yeah, and also there's a I well we talked about this last time, like a general misunderstanding of statistics and like
Mhm.
biases that can come into interpreting data where you have missing data points, which is like, do you remember the analogy? I forget what this is called, but it's like, oh, how do we make planes survive? War
Survivorship
is better.
bias.
Yeah, survivorship
Yeah.
bias. Like that's a huge example for why, or a great explanation for why they're like, we didn't see these diseases back then. I was just like, well, like people died. Like they died
Yeah. I
young,
mean,
and so you don't
honestly,
see as
like,
many numbers.
yeah. No, like you see you see like RFK Jr. being like, oh, why don't I see many like people my age with autism? I'm just like, I mean, the answer is actually a lot of them like got locked in institutions and died. Like that.
Yep, your generation, they lobotomized some of them, and then they died. They were neglected, and then they died. Same with like children diseases. They're like, we don't, these children are so robust and stuff. And I was like, yeah, because they're vaccinated, they're dying off.
Yeah.
Um,
That's like the favorite, like people like I think the one that's really perennial is like, oh, people will be like people will be like, oh yeah, spanking children is okay because my parents spanked me and like I was fine. To which the answer is like, I mean, A, you're not because you think it's a good idea to spank children, and like B, like there's some survivorship bias there.
but and also sometimes we just don't know, right? Like for example, the autism story is true. We actually do not know currently. Don't let anyone tell you they know because they don't. We don't know. There's hypotheses for possible reasons that there is increases in autism, like, but really we don't know. And if you want to work on these problems, like please come join us, become a scientist. We
Yeah.
need all kinds of ideas because we currently don't know. We're testing out a lot of different hypotheses, but yeah, we have no idea. And that's so true about a lot of things, and I think that's really scary to people. Like I think realizing that how much we don't know medically is really scary.
Yeah.
um, and
Or
the more
just in general, I think
yeah, yeah,
like
it's
yeah.
like knowing, not knowing, like learning that we don't know, and the smart people also don't know, and then we can't tell you the answer. That's scary.
Yeah. Although I think I mean I think people respond to that in different ways. Like I think some people find it scary and some people just find it really exciting. Like I think like Carl Sagan had like a whole quote about that, about how he's like, wow, I actually find this really like awe-inspiring that
I should log off says, isn't anti-vaxxing eugenics? It's so dark. So you're saying like the anti-vaxxers offspring have a less likely chance of surviving, and therefore therefore it would stop. Yeah, the problem is that that kind of eugenics doesn't work. We know, like even if you, like even if you kill off all the gays today, like Thanos styled, like next generation you're gonna get the gays. Like I don't know how to tell you. Like it's part of our um yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I think this is one of the many kind of contradictions with the anti-vaxxers, I think. I think one interesting thing also during the COVID pandemic is like I thought it was interesting that like the anti-vaxxers were claiming that like the vaccine was a plot to like reduce the population. Um, like I guess because it made people infertile, and like you'd talk to them and you'd be like, but what if like they're trying to reduce the population by not giving by making you not get the vaccine and then everyone dies? Because I'm like, the population is being reduced now, right? And then they're like, inconceivable, that could never happen.
Yeah. Yeah, so my partner works in the hospital, and I remember him telling me like towards the end of the pandemic, and now he was just like, yeah, we're still seeing a lot of people come in, but most of them were not vaccinated. And then he was just like, it's kind of even that slowing down. And I was like, oh, it's slowing down. He was just like, yeah, because all the people that would have and could have died, they're dead. So now we're not seeing as many of them anymore. And I was just like, well, that's really depressing, because that's
But
kind
it's
of reminiscent
yeah.
of how other major pandemics kind of, like the 1812 flu, right? Like 1812, is that right? But like the
Yeah,
flu back then, yeah,
1912? Yeah.
yeah, basically
Yeah.
people just all the people that would have died. It was horrible, right? Like it was a huge surge of people that died, and then everyone left was resistant.
But it's kind of bizarre that like this group of people that was talking about how there's a eugenics conspiracy kind of ended up doing that to themselves. Like,
Yeah. Oh, the problem is like the kids were just born, right? Like it didn't ask to be born to their
yeah.
parents. That I think that's it. That's the anyway.
Weren't we gonna try and end the streams on a positive note? You
Oh yeah, I know, I know. Okay. The positive note is that there is a lot of cool things that we can still discover, and we need to just keep asking questions and figure out experiments to do to give empirical evidence, and then we need to implement it in a broad swath. Like do really good communication, and then people agree. So things like formaldehyde in the milk ceases to happen, and maybe less anti-vaxxing too.
Although I
So
thought FFG293 was asking, is formaldehyde milk healthier than raw milk? Which is an interesting question. It probably depends on like how much formaldehyde you put in it. Like, is there
yeah,
an amount of formaldehyde you could put in that
that would
like
keep
would
it.
kill the bacteria but not like actually this sounds like a chat GPT question.
Ooh, so that is actually quite hard. Yeah, there could be like such low levels that it could kill the bacteria. I don't know. Also depends on the health of the cow, I guess, because like if your cow is like super healthy and is vaccinated and has all kinds of stuff, raw milk is consumed in Europe like all the time, like because their animals are happier than our animals, which are shot full of antibiotics all the time and like immune suppressed basically. They just because of ease. Um, I would probably drink raw milk in Europe and not die. I would actually I would eat like I think I've had like raw cheese in Europe. And I was fine and really think about it that hard. But here I would not, because unless you're like a happy cow farmer.
And a lot of it actually has less to do with like how the cows like the stuff that's given to the cows, but also like the processing like system. So for
Yeah,
example,
like
like
the equipment, right? So like
Mhm.
the nozzles, the things that like squeeze milk out, like the cleanliness of your bucket, how long it's been hanging out at that particular temperature, things like that.
Mhm. ChatGPT is very very forcefully reminding not or recommending not putting any amount of formaldehyde in the milk. Let's see.
Yeah.
So we've got
I mean, for reference, this chemical cross-links
mhm,
things, like it literally freezes
yeah.
it in time. It's probably not really
Oh,
good.
but yeah, it was used in food preservation. It
Yeah.
can about okay. It recommended to me either boiling the milk or putting ethanol in the milk, which makes sense. Let me just say, I only have formaldehyde. The
Milk
milk
quality.
is full of E. coli. Wow, you're okay. You're in a dire spot.
You're gonna die or spot in a dire spot.
Like
Let's
that's
think
how it
this
starts
through.
up. Woo, okay, you're in a dire spot.
I think ChatGPT thinks you're trying to kill yourself.
But like it's getting it. It's like, okay, assuming one, you must ingest this milk.
Yeah. I mean, even
um,
if you have it in really small quantities, it can't be good for your gut. Like it's killing bacteria in your gut too, right? Like
okay. But okay, it gave me an actual answer, which is 1 to 2 milliliters of formaldehyde per liter of milk. Um,
that's a negligible amount of it actually. Like I'd imagine you wouldn't even smell that. Having worked with a lot of formaldehyde.
yeah. Uh-huh.
I use 4% formaldehyde a lot for like animal um like preservation. You can smell that. It's quite strong. Mm, interesting.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting. So it also recommends that you put the formaldehyde in the milk and then you try to separate the formaldehyde out of the milk before you drink it.
before you
But
consume it. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Generally, let's not do that. I think we generally agree.
zero point
0.5% to 1%.
so
Wow.
5,000 to 10,000 ppm. And it
Oh,
says that,
actually, that's very little, actually.
yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess you really don't need that much to
Irritations,
kill them.
but it also said, like, it also, so, oh, okay, got it. So, oh yeah, oh, it did it. So it said, okay, but so the LD50, so greater than 1,000 ppm is extremely toxic to humans.
Good to know.
So the LD50 in 1 liter of milk is like 2,000 to 7,000 ppm. So
Wait, does that mean at 50% the chance I'll be dead
yeah, yeah,
at
yeah.
that volume,
Uh-huh.
at that amount?
So
Great.
like I would actually, so the answer to this conundrum is actually that I would take my chance with the E. coli. Uh,
Yeah, actually, yeah, I'll take E. coli. We'll do better against E. coli. I'll take the raw milk,
so
thanks.
don't put formaldehyde in your milk. That's the positive like thing at the end of the stream.
Yeah, currently there's no formaldehyde in your milk. Congratulations.
I think actually there's a very, very small amount from metabolism.
No artificially included
Yeah.
formaldehyde. Like imagine if they had to put it on like all the labels.
Formaldehyde milk.
Yeah, yeah, like no formaldehyde included. And I was like, yeah, thanks. Obviously. Anyway, thank you for joining us. We're
Anyway,
Philosophising, bringing you some Philosophising every week. See you next week.
don't put formaldehyde in your milk.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.